Good afternoon, Commissioners. I think we do have quorum. Could I ask everyone to take their seats so we can get started? Welcome. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Welcome to the Toronto Transit Commission meeting 1997. The big one is coming up. We'll just go through the agenda. Any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none. Minutes of the previous meeting. Could someone who was at that meeting please move to pass those? Commissioner Lalonde, all in favor? That carries. We actually have a relatively lean agenda today due to the fact that we knew we were going to have a second meeting because of the joint board meeting with Metrolinx. So I think we can just go through it as it appears. The one request that's been made is that if we could move up item number 6, the redevelopment of the TTC lands at Yonge and Egg, to the third item. That's moved by Commissioner Carroll. All in favor? That carries. And then we will, on the items 4, 5, 6, and 7, there are in-camera components to that. We can also speak to some of that in public, and so we'll go into camera once we've made it through all the in-public components of those items. So with that, I will we'll start with item number 1, the CEO's report, and I'll turn it to
Mr. Chair, the 4, 5, and 6, with respect to my time constraint, can we deal with 6 first? When we get to that group of items?
Yes.
In public?
Yeah, that's what we're going to do. So we're going to go 1, 2, then 6. Okay, so item number 1 is the CEO's report for April, and I'll turn it over to the CEO for that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll just, as I normally do, just talk to a few highlights and then flag a couple of concerns. So in no particular order, highlights, it's good to see that the CSS, the Customer Satisfaction Survey, rebounded as we predicted, back up to 79%. So it took that drop in Q4, which was to be expected, A, because there's kind of a seasonal influence on that, and B, because of the impact of Pan Am Games additional staffing coming out. But that maintains the upward trend and maintains the higher scores in recent quarters. So the actual average is well up on what it was in 2014. Just a couple of others. As of today, there are no speed restrictions on the subway, and only a year ago there were 12. It's kind of a moving feast. I mean, track inspections, and planned work will introduce new speeds as and when required. But I think credit to Gary and his team. A lot of work has been done to get assets back into commission and also to restrict the numbers of speed restrictions. What else? Overnight, last night, we reached a milestone in Presto rollout in that the installations on the bus fleet began at Queensway. So, as you know, streetcars are already done. Around 30 stations are already done. By the end of this year, the whole of the TTC, bar a few sedans on the wheelchair side, the whole of the TTC will be complete. So it's good to have got the bus installation underway. So that happened at Queensway. On a similarly positive note, 2 further points, TYSSE, Spadina Extension. As we predicted last month, the track is indeed now all finished. So that's all plain line track and special track work is all complete. More on the TYSSE later. The stations are now all around 80% complete or higher. And then the final highlight I wanted to register was on automatic train control. A number of us went down to Rochester, New York State, to witness not only equipment being manufactured, so valises and equipment racks, but also we witnessed a simulation of moving block CBTC, communications-based train control signaling, actually on a mimic diagram based upon the TTC. So that plus the work that we've been doing, laying what's called snake tray and cable and balises in the track on the planned closures that we've had, shows ATC is also making good progress. Got to be done by the fall of next year for the phase 1, which is north of DuPont, and then phase 2 concurrent with the opening of the TYSSE at the end of 2017. Of concern, a couple of items of concern. Well, one is the well-documented problems we're having with Bombardier. I wasn't going to particularly focus on that because that was the subject of much press discussion, 2 days ago. Other than to say, just to reiterate, and the Chair and I talked to this, that when I met with the new CEO of Bombardier, he was told, yeah, thank you for being realistic about the year-end figure of 30, but that's not good enough. You need to come up with other proposals. He's already agreed to bring La Pocatière online as an additional production line, but I gave him 2 weeks to come up with other initiatives to improve upon that year-end figure of 30. So that time frame hasn't yet expired. It's got about another week to go. In fact, it's a week this Friday. And then the second concern to flag, again, not new to this board, is still concerns around ridership. You'll see from the report the ridership did rebound slightly, but not enough. So we're still concerned about that. We are committed to doing we're continuing to do, analysis, and we will deliver a detailed update to this board in the June board meeting, which will be a much more revealing and meaningful milestone or analysis point for the analysis of ridership. So I'll leave it there. The rest I'll take questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. First question is from Commissioner Carroll.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I wanted to ask about the Presto rollout, because I'm wondering if we have some policy development to do. You may have answered this. I was out of town. I just saw the incoming messages. But we had people saying that the readers went down, and as a result, they were told they couldn't board. And I thought, well, that's not okay with me. But then I thought, we don't really have a policy. So would an outage of a Presto system be consistently handled in any case? Do we have some work to do in that regard?
I'll ask the Deputy CEO to answer that. Thank you.
So our policy is that if it is our fault or Presto's fault that a reader isn't working, then our customer should be able to board and pay the next time they tap. That would happen automatically. We'll need to continue to remind operators of that. It's brand new, so there's inevitably some conclusion.
So training probably.
But the point is, if it's not working, they should get on, and we have in our contract the ability to claim those lost fares if they reach any materiality back from Presto and Metrolinx.
Oh, okay. So we would have, if there was a major outage, we would have a way to ameliorate.
Yes.
Okay. So is it a matter of training then that we haven't maybe got what actually is a policy isn't necessarily completely in the mind of every operator yet? We just have to do that piece?
Yep, that's right.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Byers. And then
Maybe just following on that one, I boarded a streetcar this week in Queens Quay at the back door, and the Presto reader was not operational, and it did, when we got into Union Station, there were fare inspectors there. I could see that it creates some challenges when the unit itself is not working, and curious if we're able to recover revenue, if the unit itself is not working, do they actually tap? I tried to tap. Does that count as an attempted tap that we can recover? How does it work when the unit itself is kind of lit up red, which it was?
So there's the long explanation for that, and there's a relatively short one. So on individual single outages like that, the customer clearly is in pain. We would be potentially losing the fare. And if that reaches a level where we think it's material, then we have the ability to say to Metrolinx, you owe us this amount of money based upon past experience of the amount of money we would have collected. On an individual outage like that, sometimes at this stage, even though the reader shows that it isn't working, it means it's offline and it's still collecting data, and when it reconnects, it uploads that to the back system, so the fare then happens then. There's definitely still work to do on our real-time monitoring of devices and making sure that they are working the best way they can.
Okay, appreciate it. Couple of things I had. Page 33, Andy, this is on time on the surface fleet, and I curious between on-time departures versus short turns. Obviously, our short turns are way down, which is great, but that left-hand chart and even the data, we're not seeing much change in the on-time performance, which I find a little bit puzzling, and I know we have a very, very high target there. Just, again, with the surface fleet, how you see things going. Short-term progress is fantastic, but it doesn't seem to be manifesting itself in other areas yet.
We actually changed one of the measures here because we used to measure, only 2 board periods ago, you'd have seen a different graph on the left because that measured on time in terms of headways, in other words, gaps between vehicles. And one of the downsides of measuring, declining the numbers of short turns, in other words, basically not short turning unless you absolutely have to, say, for example, the TFS are fighting a fire, is one of the reasons we short turn is to mitigate against gaps and to get to turn streetcars early in order to plug gaps. This column on the left, this graph on the left, isn't measuring headway, it's measuring on-time departures. And the reason we're focusing on that is because I think if you don't get your on-time departures right, you're planning to fail. Because if a vehicle leaves the terminal late, you're already in trouble. So the two aren't exactly correlated, other than if the vehicle hasn't been short-turned to get back to have a right time start at the other end, then by definition, you're not going to get an on-time departure. So the two are kind of, I wouldn't say mutually exclusive. It's a balanced scorecard. You have to address both. We want to minimize the number of short turns, but equally, we want vehicles to leave on time. So that's one of the reasons we're putting so much effort into, and it's taking time, reviewing the run times and the schedules on every single route, be that 11 streetcar routes or 181 bus routes.
Appreciate that, thank you. Page 41, the mean distance between failure on, and I think this is on the new equipment, and I seem to recall you previously saying, even though the cars have been late, which is a painful reality for us, that hopefully gets fixed, they're performing really, really well. And from this chart, it looks like those streetcars are well below your target line. So I'm curious if this new equipment is performing as you'd expect.
I'll ask the COO to answer that. Thank you.
Yeah, the target that we've got in there, because we had to set a target, that target does not actually become a live target until we receive our 60th car. With very few cars on board, we fully expect that the reliability figures that you're seeing are going to go up and down quite a bit. It doesn't take much for 1 or 2 failures to cause it to drop. Just draw your attention, we are already up around 20,000, which is about 3 or 4 times the other vehicles already. So, and it is going up. And we did actually hit the target last year when we only had about 5, 6 vehicles on board. So I'm not concerned about this. It's going in the right direction. And that target is just simply telling us where we want to be after the 60th car is on board.
Got it, excellent.
I'll just add to that. I mean, just to reinforce that point, the initial figures that we quoted, bear in mind that was for an even smaller fleet. So initially, the first few performed spectacularly well. As you add more to the fleet, obviously the divisor means that the number is changed, is altered, because you're dividing by a larger number of vehicles. But on the whole, they've still been pretty reliable. They worked extremely well in the cold weather, which is good because they have a different system, hydraulic versus pneumatic, compared to the old system that gives us so many problems in the winter.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. So we're going to go Mahavik, Campbell, and then Adamson.
Thank you. I appreciate that we're going to get some greater detail in June on ridership, so that I don't need to ask any questions there. I have 2 sets of questions. One is on Presto on buses. I hope that as we roll out Presto, we're not allowing rear door boarding until we sort some of the ridership things out. Can you confirm that?
That's not the intention. It's not to say it'll never happen. That's not the plan right now. It'll still be front door boarding, albeit with the Presto readers will be on the bus.
On the bus. So they will be able to, they'll be at the back of the bus, but those will not be operational until, well, at least in the interim.
But people will be able to get off, obviously, but no plan for all-door boarding yet. I mean, it's something that you could move to, but the job one is get the Presto equipment onto the buses, and that started last night.
Right, and we're not doing rear door boarding because we want to make sure that there's a fair evasion strategy that would meet some of the challenges that might happen on buses.
Yeah, I mean, there's the wider we roll out all-door boarding, the thinner spread the fare inspectors are. So we want to get it right on streetcars before we expand it.
Okay, great. Now, the Bombardier issue, are we going into camera on that, Mr. Chair, at all?
We could if you would like.
Well, I'll just ask questions, and you can stop me if you think it's out of order. Is the maximum lawsuit, is it that, I think it's a public number, so it's around $50 million-ish, as per the contract. Is this in camera?
No, I think that's still a public question. I just, as you veer, we might have to.
Okay, you know what, maybe I'll ask those questions in camera, if that's okay?
Sure.
Just to be on the safe side. What I am wondering, though, is if, I did send an email out to, certainly Andy, I'm not sure if I copied you, Mr. Chair, on a third-party audit of Bombardier. You know, I think frankly, we can yell and scream, we've been jumping up and down, it ain't making a difference. And it has budget implications for the city. Like, we need an accurate assessment as a commission as to how this is going to roll out. And we can't trust their word. We don't really know. It impinges on, frankly, our lawsuit. It impacts our lawsuit, it impacts our ability to do planning. How many streetcars do we retire, when we retire them, and so on. I'm feeling the need to get someone in there.
This is leading to a question, right?
Yeah, can you respond to that?
Certainly, and you did indeed email me. I emailed back to say, because the question was twofold, can we do it, and can we have them pay for it? So my understanding is we can't impose payment on them. We can do a third-party audit, but they're not obliged to pay for that. We'd have to pay for it, is my understanding. I mean, effectively, we're not passive with Bombardier. We have people down there, and they're being Thunder Bay, but also Ségun. So we have very capable people. In fact, it's one of our people who picked up the ongoing weld issues in Ségun. The previous CEO, bear in mind they've just changed him, the previous CEO said had been fixed, and our man went down there and found out that no, they hadn't been fixed. So, I mean, it's not exactly a third-party audit, but we don't just take what we're given or believe what we're told. But anyway, we could do an audit, we'd have to pay for it.
And could you comment on your perspective on the wisdom of doing it?
I think I'd like to explore that with my team first, and as a point of principle, as a concept, I think it has some merit. It's definitely worth looking into. An audit is only as good as its terms of reference, though. So as long as the terms of reference were meaningful to give us what you're really getting at, and what I suspect we share the same objective, then yeah, it's certainly something we can look into. Let me discuss that with my team, Commissioner, and I'll come back to you on that.
Okay, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So at the end of February, we were $10 million behind budget and revenues. It's now the end of April. We're probably $20 million behind if the trend continues. Do we know where the leakage is occurring? Is it occurring on the subway? Is it occurring on buses? Is it occurring on streetcars? We must have some idea as to where the biggest declines are.
So the actual cause of the leakage is primarily ridership, and
Do we know where?
so, primarily surface rather than subway. Sorry, I thought you were going to say something. Primarily surface rather than subway. That's the point. That's what we're currently analysing on a route-by-route basis to see is there any correlation, for example, between where we're doing all-door boarding or where we've introduced other changes, and that will be the analysis that we'll present to this board in June.
So is June soon enough? Because by the time June rolls around, we could be, $40 million behind budget. I mean,
We'll
I
update in
I've-
May.
What's that?
We will do an interim report in May, but from our experience, the halfway point is the point by which you have a definitive trend and you have meaningful data. But we'll certainly do an update this time in May.
So let's say you have a hypothesis that the problem relates to all-door boarding. Is there something you could do to verify that may or may not be the case more quickly?
Right. We don't think it is, and we've been doing extensive fraud analysis and fare evasion analysis on those routes that well, they all have all-door boarding now, all of the streetcar routes, but we've been looking to see, has there been any correlation between the actual percentage of fare evasion and all-door boarding, and right now the margin's still around 2%, which is what you'd expect to see, and the critical inspection rate we're hitting, because we've particularly focused our fare inspectors on those routes that have ADB.
So ridership is down 4.6%. You said it's the biggest decline is in surface routes. Does that mean surface routes might be down 6 or 7% and subway might be flat, or what? Do we know what that means?
I don't have that to hand unless someone else does. I might take that on notice. Chris, do you have that?
Yep. So it's primarily across the board. It's a ridership softening on all of our routes because they're so interrelated. A bus feeds our subway network. We've seen a decrease, for example, in the SRT of around 5%, we think, both on counts and fares paid. We've overall seen a relatively stagnant number on streetcars, so our ridership on streetcars is it's pretty strong. It's what it's been in previous years, and it's really around buses where we've seen that decrease in ridership.
So why is but we've increased service on bus routes. Isn't that sort of, counterintuitive? Shouldn't ridership be up on bus routes?
So it takes a year or two when you make those sorts of changes for people to change their traveling habit and realize that there is a service there now. We certainly saw that when we canceled bus routes. We were just starting to get to the stage where some of those bus routes we canceled in 2011 were starting to get the ridership that you would need. So that's one thing. It takes time for that to happen. And the second thing is, as we said before, we believe it is more in the economy. So we're seeing that general softening, and there's a piece at the CUTA, the Canadian Urban Transit Association, next month on this, where this is being seen right across Canada. So every transit system across Canada is seeing exactly the same sort of trend.
Okay, so I think I'll make a comment later then, rather than ask a question. So I have one last question.
Sure, go for it.
And that is in regard to absenteeism. I'm just wondering, I noticed you've pointed out that it's an unfavorable trend for the 7th consecutive month. Can you comment on that?
I mean, I can. I mean, it's disappointing because we have made good headway into getting the attendance rate improved period over period through, I'm just trying to find the right page, through a series of, for something like 6.
Page 37.
Thank you. 6 successive periods, but that's been cancelled out by a decline, as you see, from July of last year. So, I mean, really, the paragraph at the bottom stands that it is a long haul. You have to very methodically and systematically, relentlessly even, performance manage people who have unacceptable attendance records. Having said that, it's also influenced by other things, such as, for example, last year we had a lot of Priority 1 incidents that can take out even up to 4 or 5 people, suicides, where you can lose people for months on end. But my Chief People Officer is very focused on this. It is something that you can never take your eye off. It's a challenging target. One stat that the AG noticed, so the Auditor General noted, was that compared to the public average, the TTC is actually slightly better in terms of attendance, non-attendance rates for the public sector. We're just better than the average.
Do you bring a report to us at some point during the year on absenteeism, or is that?
We can do. It's not a standard request, but we can if you like.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Commissioner Adamson.
So my question was very similar on absenteeism, and I commend you for talking about culture change in your report, but I did find it counterintuitive that you're reporting positive, and I recognize it's very difficult to have metrics for that, and then the other side of it of employee absenteeism, and how do you reconcile those?
I would say, and this is something I regularly speak with my management team about, culture change isn't being pink and fluffy. It's not about being nice. It's about managing the business in a more business-like fashion. So recognizing that the vast majority of TTC staff are really good people and who need to be better managed and inspired and led and who actually want to do a good job. But the corollary to that is more than ever not letting poor performers off the hook. So we have clamped down on certain things. That's not popular. If you really wanted to run a very nice ship and make it a totally happy ship, then you would just let people do whatever they want. But we're not doing that. So we are unapologetically honing in on bad behavior or unacceptable attendance records while changing the management style, and this is the essence of the culture change, to overtly managing the vast majority of people who do a good job. It's only a very small minority who wreck it for everyone else. And where previous regimes may have let them off the hook, we're not going to.
So that's great. You talked about this rate versus the public service. What is the industry standard across other transit organizations for absenteeism, do you know?
Between 6 and 7%.
So we're still a bit
So
over.
we are, I mean, our target is 6.5%. The AG noted that the public sector average was nearer 7 from memory. I'd have to look at the exact amount, but our average was just below the average for the public sector.
Do you have an action plan to tackle this?
We do. I mean, we have an attendance at work procedure, which is something that managers are expected and required to implement. I mean, obviously, it needs to take account of people's individual ailments. I mean, sometimes people have horrible ailments. It's an aging workforce in some cases. Working in transit, you are subject to things like operational incidents that can impact upon attendance. So it's never going to be the same as, say, people working in a bank, right? But on the other hand, as with any big workforce, you will have some people who try to play the system, and those are the ones that we really want to manage, such that they have one or two choices. You either change your ways or you leave.
Thank you. Commissioner Crisanti.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, yeah, Mr. Byford, my concern continues to be around customer safety. And reading your report that the offenses against customers increased for the 4th consecutive month. Where are we? What's our complement of special constables currently? And last time I asked that question, I believe we were well short of our targeted total number.
So I'm going to ask our Chief Special Constable, Mr. Cousins, to answer this and your other questions around security, please.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Crisanti. So we have completed the packages, the background packages for all the people we're going to hire. They're currently with the Toronto Police Service. Some of those folks are current special constables from other special constable services, for example, U of T. We're working with the Toronto Police Service to find out if we can move them in a little more quickly than those that have never been special constables before. And again, we're still on target for having them hired and in training in June.
So will that take us to a full complement at that point?
That'll take us to a full authorized complement, and we're asking for 12 more in 2017.
And we'll have a total of?
Of a total of 48.
48.
That's close. I think it's
Okay.
48.
What do you attribute this particular increase to? Is it just, well, maybe you could just respond to that.
Yeah, so because we hired a great stats analyst from Vancouver PD a couple of months ago, we're really starting to hone in and peel the onion on these types of issues. And so, unlike in the past, we now have a patrol action that we take, which I won't go into in public, but that we take knowing the intelligence that we have. We also are working much closer with the Toronto Police Service, and for example, they've seen a citywide increase of 10% in assaults. So we know that what's happening in our system is consistent with what's happening with the city, and we're both trying to figure out how we can help reduce that. But it's not an anomaly just to the TTC, it's a citywide issue.
Yeah, and of course the goal is to ensure that we have the safest system possible for our customers. And has there been a safety survey done, just asking our customers how safe they feel, or any ideas or suggestions they have on what we could do to improve?
Mr. Upfull, could you?
So we, as part of our customer satisfaction survey, we asked that question, and it's our highest measure. So about 90% of people give us that they feel very, very safe on the system.
Okay, but they come up with any suggestions or ideas in terms of improvements, or is it just a survey with respect to how safe they felt?
So there is a opportunity to give suggestions as part of that survey, and we can unpack that at our next presentation, the customer satisfaction, if you want. But it is the suggestions that are made are things that we are doing already. It's just that people don't understand that we're doing them.
Okay. So it's one final question with the. I notice in the next point here that says that officers or enforcement units are assigned to and directed to the higher crime areas. which is fine, but sometimes all that does is move crime to other areas. So are you comfortable with the total complement of 48? You think that will, well, yeah, the leading question here, of course, you like to have 480, but how does it compare with other systems in North America?
So remember, unlike some systems in North America who have their own police service, we not only have our complement, but we're supported by the entire Toronto Police Service, and specifically the Transit Patrol Unit. So when we talk about our numbers, those aren't the only numbers that are providing security on the system. The Toronto Police also have a number out there. And so I'll never be able to sit here with a straight face and say I've got enough people. But we're headed in the right direction. We're certainly, what I call policing with a purpose, we're certainly trying to use the resources we have in the most efficient and effective way possible. Excuse me. And I really think that even though you see us directing patrols to specific areas, those are based on trends we're seeing, types of crimes, locations, time of day, day of week, those kinds of things. We also have that overlay of that stations management model. And so just for a quick stat, since we started the stations management model, we saw a 54% decrease in illegal entries 2015 over 2014. And that's basically to your point about how safe do people feel. They feel a lot safer when they see people around. And when I mean people, I mean TTC employees, especially special constables or fare inspectors. So we're seeing a direct result from that static post, and we're also using our mobile patrols to laser focus these specific issues.
Okay. Thanks very much. That's good. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Vice Chair Heisey has questions.
So, Mr. Byford, I know we haven't accepted anything that Bombardier has done in terms of deliveries, but even on the basis of the schedule, the new schedule, which they haven't made, which is the 4 a month, I presume if they deliver as they've indicated publicly they're going to deliver, we will not be spending $60 million plus on streetcars this year, correct? We'll have probably have $50 or $60 million.
You mean new streetcars?
New
right?
streetcars.
No, I mean obviously this has an impact upon cash flow, and that's something that we adjust every period to recognize or reflect the fact that they are so woefully late in their delivery.
So my question to you is, I'm just picked a number. Let's say it's 10 streetcars short, $60 million, $6 million a streetcar? Yeah. What options do we as a board or an organization have to create mobility alternatives for our customers that we can implement quickly? So I guess one option is rehabilitate old streetcars. Another one is, can we advance deliveries of buses that maybe we wouldn't otherwise have bought to make up for so buy a bunch of articulated buses with this money. I'm not saying we can or cannot do that under the contract, but if you have a shortage of equipment over what you anticipated, do you have any thoughts on what our options are if we have money available that wasn't otherwise available?
I mean, at the end of the day, our options are limited because A, we're bound by a contract, although there's always provisions within a contract if the other party woefully fails to deliver their side of the bargain. But the more practical limitation is that even if we went out and bought a whole bunch of buses, we've got nowhere to keep them. So as we previously said to this board before, we are right up against the wire in terms of garage capacity. The best option is to proceed as we are, in that we keep the pressure on Bombardier. So although they've said 30 by year end, as I said in my commentary earlier on, we're going to see if we can get them to increase that by looking at other production lines or triple shifting, or, really it's their issue. It's whatever they can come up with, number one. Number two, to proceed with what you gave us authority to do last year, which is to renovate more of the CLRVs and the ALRVs than we were planning to do, and charge Bombardier for that. And number three, within the restraints of the existing, or constraints of the existing bus fleet, supplement routes with buses, which we're already doing on lines like the 504 King.
A follow-up question. I presume that we have space now in the Leslie Barns we wish we didn't have available to us because there's no streetcars in it. Why couldn't we use the Leslie Barns on an interim basis, some portion of them, for an enlarged bus fleet on an interim basis?
We have discussed that. Obviously we're cognizant of the fact that it's not exactly packed at the moment. It doesn't have a fuel plant. It doesn't have a whole bunch of the other things that a proper bus garage would have. You could park vehicles. It's also laid with rail, so there are areas where there's high rail. Gary, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, inside the car house, inside the barns, because Andy mentioned the high rail, the pits, we wouldn't be able to bring any in there. However, we have a fairly large yard outside, and we would be able to store them. Our exercise then we would then have to hire people to shuttle the buses back and forth to other garages for fueling and servicing and maintenance. That would be, I'd have to hire more people, yes.
I also suspect, if I might just add, that having buses run up and down Leslie Street at all hours of the day would be highly contentious with the local community.
Follow-up is I'd raised it, I think, 2 meetings ago, my experience using the Presto card, where although the station is enabled with Presto, all of the entrances aren't enabled. And I asked if there was any discussion about signage at non-Presto enabled entrances to tell people where to go if the only thing they have is a Presto card. So have we done that? And if we haven't, are we going to do it so that people know if they go to the St. George exit and there's no attendant there, they know they have to go to the Bedford exit before they get too deep in the exercise to use their Presto card?
So we can definitely look at that. The approach we're taking now is when we go to a station to install the new Presto fare gates, we're doing all entrances at the station. So from here on forward, when we go to a station, we do everything. We'll take a look at the 26 stations that we did before Pan Am Games where there might have only been one entrance. So we can look at putting signs there. By the time somebody sees the sign, they've already realized there's no Presto there. But we can think about how we can educate people that they don't try that in the first place. We'll have a look at that.
For me, thanks.
Okay. Other questions? Great. Any other questions? Second round for Commissioner Campbell to speak. We'll start with Commissioner Campbell then.
So I just want to reiterate, to the CO my concern about ridership and revenues. $10 million down after the end of February. And I know that we can fall back and say it's the economy, but when you look at the economic dashboard, there were actually 30,000 more jobs in Toronto in 2015 than it was more than 30,000 jobs in 2015 than in 2014. So don't look at the unemployment rate, look at the total number of jobs, because those are the number of people that are presumably taking transit. There's been, I don't know where the leakage is, but I think we need to make it a priority, because if we wait till June and we don't react, you're going to lose the year. I mean, it's pretty hard to recover, because then you've got to, for every 10 million you're down, you've got to go 10 million up to get back on budget, and that's really hard to do. So that's my only comment. If you can bring that forward any more quickly than you're planning so that the board can perhaps react. I don't know if it's, kids riding free that's the problem. I don't know if it's on-door boarding. Service levels seem to be rising. Customer satisfaction is rising, so it doesn't really make sense that ridership is down. Last year, we were saying that the problem was the weather. The weather hasn't been a problem this year. So those are just my comments. I think it's a problem, and it has the potential to be a very big problem.
Thank you. Other speakers? Vice Chair Heisey.
So I think the TTC should be examining, advising, discussing with transportation what are other mobility alternatives to streetcars. How can we move people in buses, on bike share? I mean, what is it we can do? Because if there's no guarantee with whatever new schedule comes that they'll come. And we should find out if we have the ability to say to Bombardier, we don't really want the last 20 because by the time we're getting them, it's so late in the piece that, I think we owe it to the public to try and find a way to create options, travel options for them that have been lost as a result of this failure by Bombardier to deliver this capacity that we need. So I don't know, that's a statement. I don't know how to translate that into a future discussion, but I think it's a discussion we should have at the board with advice from staff. What are the options? We discussed, my current ideas don't sound very good, but are there any others that we should be looking at, even if they're not perfect answers? You know, are we going to make seats available for people by doing other things that aren't going to be made available if we just sit here and accept Bombardier's delivery schedule? That's it.
Thank you. Well, I think we're going to be discussing that in a few hours at our next board meeting with Metrolinx, so there might be an opportunity there just to tee up maybe Commissioner Mihevic's comments.
Thank you. Just on that, I think frankly at this point, you know, without hooting and hollering and threatening this and that, I think really what we need is an assessment by a third party of what really the state of this contract is. And, you know, I have a feeling that it's probably too late for this contract, given that, you know, if you count when we signed the contract, it was 2009. By the time you get a new contractor, like, we're stuck. We are stuck here. However, we have Eglinton East LRT. We have Eglinton West LRT. There are other projects in the pipeline, and maybe there's an opportunity to say, okay, maybe there's a requirement that we consider an alternative for those projects. I think it will inform future purchases, for one. Secondly, it will inform it will inform strategic planning around whether we repair more vehicles, whether we repair them for a 5-year life cycle, a 7-year life cycle, a 10-year life cycle. I think we need to do some planning around this. And I think we are at the point that we can't trust Bombardier's statements. They're saying that the welding was done properly. We find it's not done properly. So like, I would frankly see, and I did write a motion, but because it's an information item, it can't be introduced unless as a special item. But if Andy would be so kind at some point to just nod his head that he might be thinking about this, that would be helpful, then I don't have to introduce it. We do need to consider a third party doing this work. And it may be that they go to Mexico. Maybe they go to, well, of course they go to Thunder Bay, and it would be someone to me with engineering expertise I think it's a civil engineer, who would basically look at the production line and look at how things are going and really do an assessment on what are we looking at here? Are we looking at a 10-year rollout? Are we looking at a 7-year rollout? Is it really within the realm of possibility that the 2019 is a real date? I'd just like to know that as a matter of fact. I don't trust Bombardier. So if the CEO could
You received the nod, I think.
I received the nod? Okay.
Yeah. So while not a motion, I think there's an understanding that we want to explore this, and we'll have this discussion on an agenda as a...
And let me say this, my hypothesis, both as a TTC rider, I'm on the system many times during the week, if not every day, is that there are crush loads. I don't feel there's much elbow room on those buses and streetcars. I'm convinced that some of this, a piece of it, I don't know how big a piece of it, is fare evasion. I look forward to that report in June on the ridership. In the meantime, I'll correspond with the chair and the CEO on stuff that I've been told. But that's where the place that I would look at this point. So, anyway.
Thank you. Other speakers to this item? I'll just quickly state, just because the Bombardier has been topical and on the part of the CEO's report, obviously we'll continue to press with the limited tools we have. Commissioner Mihevic brings up a good point, that a third party would be valuable, that kind of fresh set of eyes. I suspect Bombardier wouldn't let that third party on their property, and that's just a reality of the situation. I would, however, say, though, in light of some of the politics that's happening nationally right now, and discussions of potential financial assistance from Bombardier or bailouts from Bombardier in the amounts of billions of dollars from the federal government, I would certainly hope that if any of our federal cousins are listening, that a prerequisite of any discussion about helping out Bombardier would be that they have to straighten out the Toronto order, and it sounds like maybe even the Metrolinx order, and take the concrete steps that are required and show them tangibly to us and to a federal level of government before any action like that would be taken, because I think it would be a slap in the face to Toronto riders who are literally being left out in the cold at times to see that those taxpayer dollars go out the door if this hasn't been straightened out by that company. And so just I'll close with that, and we're not going to move. Do you need to go into camera on this item still, Commissioner Mihevik?
Just for a few minutes on the lawsuit issues. I do have some questions on the lawsuit. Yeah, when we do the others.
Okay, so we'll,
could just hold back
yeah,
on
so we won't actually, we'll just kind of table this till we go into camera and move to item number 2. Thank you, everyone, to the approval of the ACAT minutes. And if Mazen, are you at a microphone? Yeah, and just to let us know maybe what the highlights of these minutes are as we approve them.
The mic is not working.
Oh, yeah, we hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Mazen Aribi, the ACAT chair. Yes, the highlights that I would like to share with you. On March 29, the Design Review Subcommittee visited Main Station to look into the new Presto accessible fare gates. And ACAT had some concerns about few issues. Some are easy fix, some are, I think we need to look at them prior to launching and continuing installing in other stations. There is a report will be at ACAT meeting. One of them is, if I can give you an example, the height of swiping the MetroPass cards is higher than every station that's in existence. And also the location of Presto card reader will be out of reach of some riders with mobility devices. Another item is we were wondering, now that you have money coming from the federal government, how much of that money can be allocated to easier access improvements. The reason we mentioned that, we know there is a motion from Vice Chair Alan Heisey prior a couple of meetings ago about the possibility of speeding up easier access 3 and other accessibility programs. So we were wondering if we can use some of that money. Third item was, I would like to report also, on April 19, we had an interesting joint meeting, the Design Review Subcommittee of ACAT with the Advisory Committee of Metrolinx. We met at Metrolinx to look into the Eglinton Crosstown, especially the stations that, like TTC, the transfer stations. And we're happy to work with them in the future also, since ACAT have more expertise when it's come to accessibility. The number 4 is actually a compliment and thank you from ACAT to Susan Stanaka team and TTC who worked to get the elevator at Queen's Quay finally working, it was a really milestone. Finally, we can use it after a long wait. And the last thing is, our next meeting is tomorrow. If anybody interested, you are welcome to attend. It's at 1900 Yonge, 7th floor, 1 o'clock to 3:30. Thank you.
Great, thank you. There is a couple questions on this item. Vice Chair Heisey, then Commissioner Adamson.
First of all, it's a question to staff, although if the committee knows the number of months, it's the staff. So the question is, how long was the Queen's Quay elevator, streetcar elevator at Bay out of service. And I know it started to be out of service when the LRT was closed down. And so it started at that point. And when was the end? How long is that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. We did shut down the elevator in July of 2012 for the Waterfront Toronto project. We did do maintenance to keep it in a state of good repair at that point until August of 2014, when through a construction agreement, we handed over the elevator to Oxford to permit them to do their construction at 10 to 20 Bay Street. It did return to service in July of 2015 in time for the Pan Am Games. It was removed from service by TSSA on February 10th of 2016. There was a vibration issue that was deemed to be unsafe. Oxford did engage an elevator specialist company to make the repairs. They did have to source some 25-year-old equipment to make those repairs, so it wasn't an easy fix. It was repaired last week and approved by TSSA and went back into service on April 21st.
$18 months in the last 2 years? Is that about right? Just
in the last 2
14
years, it would
months.
be out of service from August of 14
to July.
until July
And
of
that's
15.
right,
So
that's
that's
12 months.
approximately 11 months.
Okay.
And then most recently, it was out of service from mid-February until the third week of April, so just over a month most recently.
How many elevators do we have that service, that people rely on to access our stations, that we do not control, like this one? So this is an elevator that belongs to Oxford, right?
Gary and I are just discussing, Mr. Chair, and we believe it's in the order of 5 or 6.
Have we considered assuming, trying to assume control of those elevators so this doesn't happen again? That we don't have this kind of long service interruption?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have looked at the Queens Quay elevator. Portions of it are located in the developer's property, and it is powered from 600 volts from the developer's property. So it's somewhat complex, because it was constructed in the early 90s. It's somewhat complicated right now to separate the two.
And my last question is that the property directly opposite the existing elevator, which is on the east side of the west side of Bay Street, is up for sale and probable redevelopment. Has the TTC staff identified a future standalone TTC elevator location in a future redevelopment of that property? And could we?
Through you, Mr. Chair, at this time, we have not, because our focus has been on getting one elevator into each of our stations, and we're about halfway through at this point. So it is not currently recognized in our plan between now and 2025, but it could be considered in planning once we've completed all of the stations.
I'm not suggesting that we do it, that we get a developer to pay for it as part of their development. But it's self-standing for us. So I'm saying this would be outside of our capital project. Could the city's TTC staff pursue that with city planning in the context of a future redevelopment discussion for the property next door?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do always pursue that when we have an opportunity adjacent to a station, and we will.
Thank you, Commissioner Adamson.
So mine was on elevators as well. In the report on page 6 from the Service Planning Subcommittee, it talks about a number of elevators that were not completed on schedule due to scope changes. I just wondered if there's a status update on that. I guess that's to staff.
Okay, just let Susan / Gary find their notes and they'll respond to that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll have to get back to ACAT to ask a few questions. We did an overhaul last year at Finch, and that was completed on schedule. I'm not quite certain which ones were not completed on schedule. So I'll have to follow up and ask some more questions.
Okay. I'll move receipt of the minutes. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. We had agreed, sorry, I missed, you should have it all in front of you, but Councillor Grimes has asked us to introduce an item. And so the communication's there, and so it would be number 8 on our agenda. All in favor of introducing that matter? That carries. Thank you. So that's now number 8. We agreed when Commissioner Carroll was here that we would go now do item number 6. So any public questions on that? We'll start with Commissioner Byers.
So I was curious about, this is such a central site to the system, and obviously there's a lot of bus traffic along Eglinton currently, so in consideration especially of the Phase 3 interim garage, does the crosstown, when it comes on online, I guess in 2019, what impact will that have on our bus service on Eglinton? Does that reduce the amount of service we deliver on that route, and does that impact on the facilities that will need to be available at Yonge and Eglinton?
Just a point of clarification, the crosstown will come on stream 2021, and I'll ask Chris to comment on the bus.
Remain ever hopeful that the project will be early. No.
Yes, I know.
My mistake, yeah.
We can but hope. Okay, Chris.
So it will dramatically reduce the number of buses that we run on Eglinton, but there are other routes, for example, down Yonge Street, the Lawrence bus that actually come into Eglinton Station. So there will continue to be the need to service buses out of that garage, but we've scaled the size of the number of those bus garages, taking into account that the crosstown will be there.
About that, Commissioner Lalonde, question?
Yeah, am I correct in remembering that that the chair asked for a report on the overall status of our real estate holdings and potential commercial application of those? And if that memory is correct, when are we supposed to be looking at that?
Commissioner, I think that's the accommodation strategy that you're referring to.
No, it wasn't that.
So Joanna, can you comment on that?
It wasn't about accommodation.
Okay, so property.
It was about, I thought the chair had asked that we review all of the real estate holdings of the TTC and what the potential commercial utilization of those resources.
Sorry, I misunderstood real estate, so I'll ask my property team to comment.
So the question is just,
Yes.
when are we expecting to look at that overall report?
Sorry, I apologize. That is expected in the fall of this year. We have actually initiated a review, so the results of that review will be coming before the board in the fall.
And that would include potentially the Yonge Eglinton lands as well?
There will be an assessment of the Yonge Eglinton lands, but the work that's being done, that's being reported on here, will essentially be in parallel to that. So there will be an evaluation as part of that other exercise as well.
Okay, thank you.
Are there questions? Okay, so that one, yep, go for it. Commissioner Campbell.
In regard to the, it's on page 3, it makes reference to we're waiting to see what Metrolinx, what their needs are for the particular area at Yonge and Eglinton. When will they come back? When will they know that? It says these lands have been turned over to Build Toronto once a final determination of permanent property requirements for the Eglinton Crosstown project is made. So when will that be?
Through you, Mr. Chair, Metrolinx has just submitted their 30% design for the crosstown, so we're in the process of reviewing it. So it's probably going to be about another year away.
Year away?
Yep.
Okay. And then there's reference on page 5 of TTC partnership with City and Build Toronto. Is Metrolinx supposed to be part of that discussion as well, or partnership?
Apologies. Metrolinx will be brought into the steering committee discussions as required. Certainly, they have a role to play in any redevelopment of the lands because they are putting in a new station entrance for the crosstown within those lands, as well as some other infrastructure. So certainly, they will be brought into those discussions.
So I gather in terms of this particular property at Yonge and Eglinton, we are bound by the leases until 2021, correct?
No, actually, we're bound by those leases until 2070.
2070.
That's correct.
But we are enabled to renegotiate the amounts in 2021?
The rents will be up for renewal to market rents in 2021. That's correct.
But we're under an agreement until 2021.
There is an agreement in place. The lease agreement has a provision for an extension of an additional 50 years for 2 of the leases. And that gives them the rights to do that extension, assuming that we come to terms on market rents. But they can certainly take any discussion or any disagreement on market rents to arbitration, which they did the last time in 1991.
And they were successful.
Well, we did get an arbitration decision that was in our favor, certainly brought the rents up significantly from what they were before.
Is this a common arrangement with public sector entities owning property and leasing it and getting the short end of the stick?
There are numerous types of arrangements like this. The length of the lease is a reflection of the type of infrastructure that's being built on the property. So a property owner or someone entering into a lease of this nature to put up these tall office buildings or large office buildings will want some certainty about the length of time they have the right to be there to make that investment.
Okay, good, thank you.
Commissioner Mihevc with questions.
Thank you. So if I understand this report correctly, the public portion of the report, basically what you're asking is, given that the TTC had controlled the property at one point, I think prior to 2005, if I'm not mistaken, and then it went to Build Toronto, now you're saying basically the development of this parcel of land will be a function of a joint committee of us, Build Toronto, and Build Toronto, right? It's now going to be, basically, we're going to be in the orbit on the committee that defines how this is going to proceed.
Essentially, through you, Mr. Chair, the only lands that were declared surplus by the board were the old bus terminal lands.
That's
phase 4, that's shown on the drawing. That was declared surplus. We have not transferred it to Build Toronto because of the Crosstown project. So that transfer has yet to occur. The remaining phases, though, remain in TTC ownership, and those are the leasehold lands. So certainly TTC has a significant role to play in the steering committee with the city and Build Toronto to make sure that any redevelopment meets our needs as well as city building objectives.
Right. And the city building, call it the commercial objectives, perhaps residential objectives, they're going to be achieved through the Build Toronto. And our role at the table as the TTC will be to basically make sure that the public transit objectives, given that this is going to be one of the most important nodes in the city now from a public transit perspective, are preserved.
That's correct.
That's the balance of interests.
It really is a balance of interests. That's correct.
Right. And now phases 1, 2, and 3, just because, so we own the land and we own the building above as well?
We do not own the building. Those are the leasehold improvements that are on the lands. We own the lands that they sit on. And our station and structures are underneath those buildings. So they're
We own that.
Yes, we do. We own that.
Right, okay, okay. And so, and what's up for negotiations is the rent for those, for basically their right to, their ability to have their buildings on our land.
It's really just the amount of the future rent. They can leave the buildings as they are under the terms of the current lease. What's coming up for renewal is the rental rate.
Right. And if we don't come to an agreement and they decide to walk, do we get the buildings? Is that what the contract says?
I don't know that detail in the lease. I would expect that it would simply go to arbitration.
Okay, great, thank you.
Other questions? Just one question. I'm looking at kind of the guiding principles that make up attachment 2. And we've given quite a bit of time, and I know the report's coming back about an accommodation strategy with consolidating office space for all the efficiencies and savings. Would at least preserving the possibility of a head office being located on this site be one of those guiding principles for the commission?
Mr. Chair, that is certainly an option that we are exploring with the City and Build Toronto. It's something that we could explore.
May I just add to that? I just referring back to my notes of a meeting that was held on the 13th of April 2016, which was the Canada Land Steering Committee. I said at that meeting there are 3 principles for the TTC. Number 1, that the TTC be made good on revenue. Number 2, that transit requirements be fully accommodated. And number 3, which is kind of a subset of number 2, that we should include provision for a new head office. My read of the guiding principles attachment 2, Chair, to which you referred, I think that's accommodated within guiding principle number 2, where it says meet transit infrastructure needs, including operations existing and future and facilities. But just to reassure you, we have made it very clear to PT that we want to explore that.
Okay, great, thank you. Other questions on this item that are in public? Okay, with that, that's going to be another one we'll have to table for the moment until we go into camera. And now we move on to item number 3, renewal of West Construction Field Office at 1 East Mall Crescent. Questions of staff? To speak? To move approval of Commissioner Mihevc, all in favor? That carries. So what I'm going to do with the remaining items, well, actually, we still have Councillor Grimes. So, yeah, I just want to see if there are questions in public, of a public nature on these other items. So number 4 is TYSSE claims. I don't think there really can be. Number 5 is procurement authorization amendment, and we might be bound there too. 6 we've dealt with. Number 7, I don't think there can be there either, so we are at number 8. Councillor Grimes' motion on Humber Bay Shores. Now, so that item is in front of us now. Well, the items, it's in front of us. I guess we'll have to see if there are questions of staff first on this, and Commissioner Campbell does have questions.
yeah.
Recognizing this, I'll just preface this by saying I know TTC staff helped in the drafting of this motion, but recognizing it is coming to us from a city councillor, not from staff.
Yep, just a question in regard to the 66, you know what, I can ask these questions offline. It's okay.
You're fine? Other questions? Yeah. I guess the only question is, do we also want to refer this to Public Works? No? Okay. So a motion by Commissioner Mihevc to refer this to staff to report back. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. I believe that completes our in public session. You can all wait around with us and take the subway down to Metrolinx later for those of you who are attending for that first ever meeting. But with that, we're going to move into the in-camera portion of the meeting now. So thank you. I'm going to move by the chair that the board recess as the committee of the whole to deal with litigation or potential litigation matters, labor relations, employee negotiations, security of the property, and to receive advice which is subject to solicitor-client privilege. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. We'll recess for 3 minutes to clear the room, and then we'll get back at it. Thank you.